Hey you, it's True with the first review of the new KOJIRO. Okay, you got me there. It's actually KOJIRO and she is a new light SSR with a medium speed of 415.
巌流佐々木小次郎未熟なダメダメ剣士です。だからお役に立てるかどうか。もしそれでもいいというのならどうぞ連れて行ってくださいませ。
She seems to have quite the low self-esteem. Let's see if we can help her build that up when we look at her skills. Her first active is called Clean Strike, gives 2 spirit, costs 100 time units and deals 100% damage to one enemy. However, in most cases, this will actually deal 600% damage and immediately give herself the next turn again. This massive improvement will trigger if this is the first time this skill has been used while on the battlefield, or if this unit has used Sakura Storm since this skill was last used, which is her second active. 600% damage is quite nice, especially because this ignores damage reduction effects, skin passive skills and the counter stance status effect. So it is kind of the perfect setup for her second active skill, which is extremely strong, and it is called Sakura Storm. 2 spirit cost, 100 time unit cost, and attacks all enemies. 200% to 500% total damage per enemy, depending on how many charges KOJIRO has currently stored. And the kicker is that this attack ignores any effects of non-boss enemies that would prevent the targets from being defeated. It also ignores counter stance status effect and the effects of skin passive skills, both of which very useful for attack all skills, and definitely a setup for her to potentially sweep the enemies, especially if she has charges stored. Her third active skill is called Healing Blossom and gives 2 spirit, costs just 10 time units and is basically a self-support skill. It heals her fully, purifies her, grants her a sleep ward, a stun ward, a poison ward and an endure, so a temporary hold ground. However, this skill becomes locked for 50 time units after use, and if she already has defeated at least 1 unit with attacks while on the battlefield, this will actually become locked for 100 time units after use, which is quite the long time. So after her first skill, her survivability or her sustain will suffer a little bit, although we still have to look at her passives, of course. But before that, we look at her final skill, which is the one that will probably be the one that is gonna be most rarely seen, because it is very specific in terms of the requirements. It is called Swallow's Flight. 2 spirit cost, 50 time unit cost, and immediately defeats 1 non-boss enemy that has survived for 200 time units or more on the battlefield, ignoring revenge passive skills, revival passive skills, any passive skills or effects of active skills that would prevent the target from being defeated, and also ignoring guardians. This is only usable if KOJIRO has 2 or more charges stored, and it is only usable 3 times per battle at most. It also consumes 2 charges on the user, which is slightly problematic, I think, for her Sakura Storm. Then again, of course, it is a very powerful skill, similar to the Regal Eclipse of the original Dark King Arthur that had the first execute skill. But 200 time units is a very, very, very long time in today's meta, and it will only become longer and longer the lower the time units and the turn getting gets in Evertale. So that is why this skill might look a little crazy on paper. I wouldn't really worry about it too much. Now luckily for KOJIRO, it doesn't end there, because we still have her passives to cover, which make her even better for sure. The first one, called Legendary Resolve, gives her a poison ward, a sleep ward, a stun ward, endure and counter stance for 300 time units whenever she enters the battlefield. She also starts off with 80% damage reduction from attacks. However, this is lowered by 10% for each enemy this unit has defeated, to a minimum of 50%. So if she defeats more than 3 enemies, she will still keep permanent 50% damage reduction from attacks. Whenever KOJIRO defeats any number of non-conjured enemies with an attack while on the battlefield, she gains a charge, she gains recovery mist for 100 time units, which is very nice, having that kind of perma healing after every turn and a certain chance to be purified. Also, all allies are purified, and another random ally is given the next turn by reducing their current time units to 0. So that is an extremely strong triumph passive right there. Although, of course, we have to point out again, this is only for non-conjured enemies, which is especially important to specify considering the latest releases with all the kinds of clones and copies flying around. It gets even better with her second passive that is called Killer Focus. This unit is immovable, so she cannot be sent to the reinforcements from the battlefield. She also cannot be stunned until she has defeated at least one enemy with an attack while on the battlefield. And after that, of course, she will still have the stun wards. Now this is where it gets a little crazy. She gets 25% reduction to time unit costs whenever she defeats one enemy with an attack while on the battlefield. And this one doesn't specify that it has to be a non-conjured enemy. Any enemy will trigger this and give her up to 75% maximum TU reduction, which means the 100 time unit skills we discussed before, like Sakura Storm, will be lowered to 25 time units, and she will likely always take 2 turns with that, possibly has already quite a few charges stored, so Sakura Storm dealing 500% to all enemies every 25 time units, ignoring any survival passives, is quite massive. Though of course that skill doesn't ignore armor, but you can see the steamroll potential here for sure. And finally, what makes her even better is that each time she takes damage from an attack and survives until after the end of the turn, which given her huge armor isn't all that unlikely, she will be granted counter stance for 300 time units and heal for 30% of her max HP. Note that this does not specify that there is any exception to that. For example, if she is sleeping or stuff like that, she will wake up and get counter stance. So all in all, what does this mean for her? KOJIRO seems like a unit that is quite potent against stun teams, maybe even including burn. Also sleep teams should watch out for her. Facing strong poison could be a problem for her though. And one weakness or kink in her armor, especially pretty much literally, is stealth units. On the one hand, they could ignore her armor and her counter stance, both of which are very important ingredients for her to stay alive, given that she only has an endure. And on the other side, her Sakura Storm doesn't actually ignore stealth status effects, so she will also have a pretty hard time clearing those units. In general, if she gets a non-conjured enemy killed, then she can also support your team with a Purify, with that kind of give turn. But other than that, she is very much focused on herself, on hopefully getting kills, so her TU reduce more and more.
5 hours later.
Of course, she will get vulnerable from that, Healing Blossom taking longer to unlock and her armor going down. But if she doesn't run into any major counters of her skill set, then this unit probably has the highest potential to sweep the board, sweep the battlefield in the shortest amount of time. Or rather, sweep an opposing battalion. Of course, her hate will also increase quite massively once she gets kills. And despite her passive skills having no specific awakening scaling, this is a unit where I would highly recommend to either fully awaken her or skip her entirely. I don't see much value in her at one copy, which will make it much more difficult for her to get kills, which is the entire point of her skill set basically. Now, which teams could pick her up? I think any non-sleep, non-burn team can derive value from this unit. So if you have enough soul stones for a full awakening, which I would recommend to only attempt above 100,000, and you have a nice slot for her in your team, then I would say go for it. That's it. If you got her or encounter her, share your experiences with KOJIRO down in the comments. I'm curious what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe to become a true carrot. I very much appreciate your support. And as always, thanks for watching.